Hello and welcome to Bipolarcast. This is a podcast where myself and Matt Bazuki speak to people with bipolar disorder using metabolic therapies for bipolar disorder, such as the ketogenic diet. Me and Matt have both used ketogenic diet ourselves, and we've experienced profound benefits on our bipolar symptoms. And we speak to other people who have had experience with ketogenic diet to learn about their experiences, as well as clinicians and researchers in this space. Today, we're very lucky to have a friend on the podcast who is remaining anonymous for the podcast, and we offer this to all of our guests if they'd like to be anonymous when they talk to us, because many people have had experiences that they really want others to know about, but they want to also, they're not at the stage where they want to talk about it publicly, so we always respect that. So thank you very much for joining us today. And so we met our guest today through Keto Live, which is a conference in Switzerland. It's a scientific conference about ketogenic diets. And I met the mother of our guest today, and she has described to me how this has been transformative in their family using ketogenic diet for their daughter who has bipolar disorder. And so we tend to meet many families at these conferences. I spoke to 2 or 3 families at these conferences over the summer who were telling me about their experience with keto and the effect it's had on them. And most people do want to talk about this and try to share it because maybe it could benefit others with this condition, which is very much in the spirit of Bipolarcast. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I was at this conference called Keto Live, and I met your mother, and there's really, you see a lot of families becoming very interested in this, and that includes my family. My father helped me a lot with bipolar disorder, and we researched together, and Matt and his family, who went through the bipolar journey, and this led them to metabolic therapy and wellness. And so it's interesting to see how the whole family becomes involved in bipolar disorder. When you have bipolar, it's never hopefully it's never just yourself, it's usually your family become a part of it.
Exactly.
How did you, yes, absolutely. And how was it for your family? We always ask, before doing ketogenic diet or metabolic therapy, how was bipolar for you and your family? What kind of a journey was it like for you? For myself and Matt, it was a very difficult one. And I'm interested to know how it was for you growing up with bipolar.
Well, yeah, it wasn't easy. I'll put it, firstly, I was pretty young when I started showing symptoms. So I was about 3 years old, actually. And at first my parents thought, okay, she's just a very, because I'd have times where I'd be very hyper, right? Where I just could not sit still. And then other times I would just be very depressed, have very low self-esteem. That was kind of the beginnings, and then it just got worse later. But they thought, oh, she's just a very intelligent child. She's intellectually bored. We should start her in school early. And so what they did, they looked around, even in private schools and things like that, even though they're pricey, but they're like, she needs something for her brain, right? They didn't find anything really, really great. So what they did is they homeschooled me. And so I started a year early. However, of course, it wasn't so much that I was just intellectually bored. I was mentally ill, so it just became progressively worse. I started during what we now know was the manic phase. I would start hallucinating. I'd just become very delusional. I know one time, this is all kind of before the age of 6, right? I was diagnosed when I was 5. This has happened before that age. So I remember my mom telling me once I was, in the second story of a house and I tried to jump out, and my mom's like, why the heck did you do that? Right? She caught me just in time, and I was like, it's okay, Mom, I can fly, like I just lost all sense of reality, right? I would argue back and forth. I'd become very irritable, very aggressive. So I was, I guess, sitting down once doing math, right? And I had this math textbook and I was arguing. It was like I was arguing back and forth with a math textbook. And I was in this very heated debate with the math textbook about how I was right and it was wrong. And I was trying to, and she's like, what is going on, right? So I also would tell my mom, there was this what's it, like Basil the Mouse Detective. It's like a kid's cartoon, but there's like a bat character in there. And I would tell my mom, oh, that bat, he's under my bed, he's making fun of me. I would hear him make fun of me, and my mom would, again, like, what's going on, right? This is weird. I told my mom, I'm not taking a bath, there's blood in that bathtub. And of course there was no blood, there's nothing, right? So I was just seeing these things, hearing things. I would come to my parents. I'd say, you called me. They're like, what are you talking about? We didn't call you. Right. I'm like, no, I'm so sure you called me. I actually have a vague memory of that. I was laying in bed. It was late at night and I just had trouble falling asleep. I always had trouble sleeping, always. And and I was just like, I think, like, I would just hear sort of this voice, and then I was like, oh, I think that's my dad calling for me. And I went down, and he was like, what are you talking about? I went down in the kitchen, and I was like, you called me. And if he was like, what, so things like that. And then I'd get really depressed, and I would just, I guess, like, take off my shirt, crawl under like a desk or something, rock back and forth crying, telling my parents, who absolutely never hit their children, right? I'd tell them, you have to hit me. I'm a bad child. I'm such a bad child. You have to hit me. And they were like, what? My mom, that was especially hard for her, right? She'd be just cradling me like, I love you, Marie. I love you so much. You're not a bad child, right? What are you talking about? Um, Things like that. And I know before the age of 6, I had tried to kill myself multiple times just during my, depression phase. So my parents very quickly realized something's very wrong. She's not, she's not right in the head, right? There's mental illness going on here. And so they looked around. We were in Europe at the time, and they looked all over Europe trying to find a child psychologist who had any clue what to do. Half the time they told my mom she's too young to be mentally ill, and they wouldn't even see me. The other part of the time they'd say, well, there's obviously something wrong, but we can't help you. We don't know what to do. We're not trained to deal with, like, children aren't this severe usually, right? And so that was very difficult because on one hand, you have a child who's just consistently depressed, manic, and you can't find help. You don't know what to do. So actually, my mom started keeping a journal where she'd basically write down what was going on with me, my moods, how they were appearing, things like that. And over time, she realized a pattern. So she was able to say, at this time of the month, I got to prepare for this. She's going to start getting depressed. Or in 2 weeks, she's going to start acting manic. I've got to prepare for that. So then they were able to prepare. But it was very stressful for my parents, of course, because it's hard to see your child just struggling, that not being able to help, no doctor can help. And so around the time I was 5, I think, or maybe shortly before, another family member actually told my mother. This family member of mine had also had got the same diagnosis as me. She told my mom, hey, she might be bipolar. And by the way, so she was living in the US, this family member, and she told my mom she might be bipolar. And by the way, there's a child psychologist here who could help maybe. And so my mom went to the US. We stayed with this family member. Thankfully, I'm really grateful that we were able to stay with them for free. That's partly how I was able to get help. And I saw this child psychologist, and he did a lot of testing, right? Tested for everything just to really make sure it was bipolar, right? And he said, she is just so bipolar. Like, said, out of all the kids I'm seeing, she's at the top. She's just so bipolar, right? And he was trying me on different medications, weren't working. And eventually he said, okay, I'm going to try her, because my other family member who had bipolar was on lithium and was doing very well with lithium. And so he reached out to, like, the National Institute of Mental Health and was like, okay, can I put this girl on lithium? Her family member has the same diagnosis, is doing well. Is this okay? Because, lithium can have really strong side effects. So he didn't want to just put me on lithium. But the National Institute of Mental Health said, go ahead. If it's working for a family member, it'll probably work for her. So I was put on lithium when I was 6 years old. That was after 6 months of testing and trying out different medications. And that started working for me. However, I still had psychosis. So I still have awful nightmares, hallucinations, sleep disturbances. And so when I was 7 or 8, I was put on Abilify, and that then helped with that. So, and then for some years I was like that, but due to the nature of my illness, I was not able to go to school, for example. They tried to put me in school in 2nd grade. It just didn't work out. I was too ill. Even though it was a private school, small classrooms, is partly why they chose private, even though it's so expensive. They said, well, smaller classrooms, be less stressful, right? It was still too much, and I was just not getting a consistent education because part of the time I was just too ill. And so they decided to homeschool me. However, in Europe, in different countries, it can be very difficult to homeschool, even illegal. So we tried moving around to different places where we thought, oh, here we can homeschool. And then it didn't work out. So pretty much until I was around 16, we lived not longer than 2 years in different areas. And so that was difficult. I have 2 younger siblings as well. And so, they were also homeschooled, of course. When you move around a lot, it was like, okay, we got to give them a consistent education, And so we were able to get a good, consistent education that way. But of course, they also saw me sometimes really struggling, my younger siblings. Yeah, we've just moved around a lot, just stressful, trying to find a place where I would be able to homeschool, where we could keep in touch with good doctors. And yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, it's every time I hear that, it makes me think just well done for surviving all that, because I think people don't often appreciate being bipolar when you're young, especially. It's just so disruptive
Yeah.
to any normal kind of a life. Like, it's impossible
Yeah.
to live a normal life in so many ways, with education and school.
Exactly.
And many people feel like, absolutely, and many people feel like they're just trying to catch up with their life when they finally get well, because they've missed
Yes,
out on so much.
exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, I've certainly felt like that, and a lot of people on the show have as well. So it's so you had a really severe illness from a very young age, and that must have been, I mean, I can't even imagine being 6 years old and then having these kind of symptoms, let alone being older and having them. It's hard enough, but that must have been really terrifying for your family and for
Yeah.
And
I'm
so
kind of proud of myself for surviving. I pat
yeah,
myself on the back
I think
sometimes. I'm like, I'm alive. That's great.
that can't be said enough. Like, absolutely, like, well done for surviving it. It just can't be said enough. Like, it's really remarkable as well from that age to get through it like that. So I mean, it's a real wild west when you go in for diagnosis and treatment, and often, like, people take 10 years to even get the correct diagnosis. And then when you
Yeah.
actually get on treatment, you're like, hooray, finally I've, getting on treatment. And then you find out that often
Yes.
that doesn't work, or you might be a
Mhm.
non-responder. How did what led you to trying ketogenic diet, and what was the experience like for you doing ketogenic diet? How did it change life for you as someone with bipolar disorder?
Yeah. So it's actually interesting. I was 16 years old when I started, just barely turned 16. Or was I 16 and a half? Yeah, I was 16 and a half when I decided to start low carb paleo, is what I started out with. And it was actually so by the time I was 16 years old, well, 14, 13, 14, 15, I was having so many health issues. My bipolar disorder, of course, which was mostly stable on the meds, but I still struggle with depression. And I also had side effects from the medication, so I was numb often, and things of that sort. My memory was impaired, and just different things, but I would still get depressed. So of course I had that. But on top of that, I was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, hormonal issue. And then, of course, I then later developed eczema. And I had other health issues where I was just in and out of the doctor's office. They were checking my gallbladder. They were checking me for seizures. They were checking all my blood work, everything, because I would have just awful abdominal pain, like would make me cry, and I don't even know what caused it. Nothing, right? I would have, my vision would go gray. I'd see halos around people, just different things. I'd wake up in the middle of the night as if I had been suffocating with horrible chest pain. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And it came to the point where, at one point, my ankles were constantly swollen, and I was like, well, that's not good, because I knew with lithium it might cause kidney problems. And swollen ankles can be a sign of that. That can be a sign of other things. But they were just constantly, my feet and ankles were constantly at a low level of swelling. I was just gaining weight, and I wasn't sure what to do, because of the thing is, so I was raised right with the high carb, low fat diet. And it was all about whole grains, mainly plant-based, Mediterranean, whatnot, right? My family was very much of a health nerd in that sense, and kind of a few generations of that, right? My grandmother tried very hard to, help my family, my mom, be healthy. And then my mom tried to raise her kids very healthy, but it was the sort of, right, high carb, low fat health thing, low salt, very mainly plant-based, things like that, whole foods, whatnot. But I was just getting sicker and sicker, and I was exercising, I was eating this diet, and I was like, what's wrong? It's not like I'm pigging out on junk food. It's not like I'm very sedentary, and I'm becoming sicker and sicker. And one day I sat down at lunch and I couldn't even remember what I had eaten for breakfast. My memory was that bad. I sat down at lunch and I said, I know I got up this morning because I'm up, but I don't even remember getting up. I can even remember at like 12:30 what had happened till around 10 a.m. That's around what I could only remember a few hours. Before that, I couldn't remember. And at that point, I just said, I'm dying. The doctors can't figure out what's going on. I'm 16 years old. I should not be only having a few hours. I shouldn't be able to only remember a few hours of what just happened, right? My mental health was plummeting as well, despite the medications I went in. So over the years, because lithium and Abilify really worked, they just upped it, right? But every few years, I need it upped. And at this point, I had it upped again, and I was already at a really high. I think I was taking 900 milligrams a night and 15 milligrams of Abilify a night. Constantly getting blood work done, right? Making sure my kidneys were still okay, right? And so I was like, what is going on? So I get diagnosed with PCOS due to, just a bunch of symptoms. And the gynecologist, she wants to put me on the birth control, which is a common treatment for PCOS. But she also said, stay away from the carbohydrates. You don't need carbs. Carbs, you don't need it. And she was kind of onto something, because I do know with PCOS now, they tend to have insulin resistance. They tend to have trouble with the carbohydrates and chronic inflammation. And so I was like, okay, what's going on? Because at that point, I was thinking of going vegan. I had done it for 2 months before, didn't make a change in my health at all. But I was like, oh, I'll try vegan again. Maybe this time it'll work, right? So I was like, what's going on? This is completely against everything I've ever learned. You need carbohydrates. You'll die if you don't get them. That's your energy, right? Source of energy for the body. But my mom was like, okay, that's interesting. And she also has certain health issues, some similar health issues. And so she's like, well, let's try out this low carb paleo diet. It was for people with women with PCOS. It was this program. And we're like, okay, we'll sign up for it. It's online. You get a meal plan. You get all this stuff. And this lady on this thing, she was saying, butter will not clog your arteries. It's okay to eat butter, right? Again, everything against what we had ever been taught. And so I was like, okay, we'll try that out. So I started out for about half a year doing low carb paleo, but within 2 weeks of starting that diet, firstly, all my hormonal acne was gone, my awful abdominal cramps gone, just different things, right? My memory was better, but the thing is, because my memory was so bad, I often forgot to take my medication as well for my bipolar. So it would kind of be like, I'd be good for like 2 days, maybe 3, and then I'd have crazy symptoms. And I'd be like, wait, I've been forgetting to take my meds, So 2 weeks going in, and I was like, wait a minute, it suddenly struck me, like I was just doing well. My mood was better, physically better. And I just said, wait a minute, I haven't been taking my meds for 2 weeks. Right? And I was like, what's going on? I haven't been taking my meds. And I did something kind of stupid, but I didn't tell my parents, because I was like, I'm better than I've ever been in my entire life. And I was like, I'm just going to see how this goes for a month. If it works out for a month, I'll tell my parents that I've been off my meds, right? And a month goes by, I just get better. I start losing weight. Mentally, it's almost like a huge burden has been lifted from my chest and my shoulders. So after a month of doing that, I told my mom, hey, by the way, this is working great, and I haven't been taking my meds. And she's like, what? And I was like, let me explain, right? So she was on it though. She's like, all right, you have been doing better. She even noticed it. She's like, you seem to be doing much better. So she said, well, keep going, but if anything ever happens, right, we still had my meds. And so I just keep getting better. And after half a year, I said, well, I'll try out keto. It was kind of like that. I was like, I'm already low carb paleo, might as well try out keto. I can eat some dairy, which is nice. I was missing the dairy on a paleo diet. But I tried out keto for a month. And after that, I was like, my mood is even better. I didn't realize. So on the low carb paleo diet, again, I was better than I'd ever been, even off my meds, but I was still sometimes occasionally a little bit depressed. But again, I didn't even know I was depressed, because compared to the depression I had suffered before, I was happy, And so I went keto, and I was just really, I was having a great time. Like, I would just wake up and see the sunshine and be like, it's going to be a good day, I'm feeling cheerful. And to me, especially the last few months before going low carb and then keto, the only joy I had in life, and mind you, this is after my meds going up and everything, right after they leveled it up and all the milligram, I literally, my only joy, if you want to call it that, was the idea when I went to bed that maybe I'll die tonight. Maybe tonight I'll just stop breathing or something. That was the only thing that brought me any sense of hope, if you will. And every morning I'd get out of bed thinking, dang it, I didn't die last night in my sleep. That was literally, that's how I lived. So for me then to just wake up and be like, it's going to be a good day today, that was foreign to me. In fact, I was scared when I started feeling that. I'm like, what's going on? This is not what I'm used to at all. So I was like, wow, keto's working great. I even in my wildest dreams of being healthy, I was never that healthy, and I started about half a year into keto. I then I started ovulating, and I started my period at 11, and at 17 and a half, all right, I start ovulating, which is nuts, right? And I had no clue what was going on. And I was like, what's going on? I was like, I'm just ovulating. I had no clue. For years, I did not ovulate, even though I'd started my period. And so I was like, I'm absolutely sticking to keto now. I literally can have children now, thanks to keto. And so, and I did college. I'm in college now. I'm getting up, I'm getting better nights of sleep. I used to wake up in the middle of the night a lot. My sleep is much better. Just so many things. My memory is so much better. People tell me you have such a good memory, where it used to be that I was sitting at lunch, couldn't even remember what I'd eaten for breakfast because I just couldn't remember anything. And I was, just the idea that one day I can have a family, that I'm actually successful in college and things like that. That was not in my life. That was not in my life before I went keto. And so, yeah, that's just been that so far.
I remember, this is a remarkable story. It's insane how much this diet, how many things that were disruptive in your life that were causing you problems, that were causing you health issues that
yes.
you didn't even know that could be addressed by a diet. And I remember when I was starting to try to get better in 2018, it would have been, and I'd had some insight around my illness. And so I started to do everything the doctors wanted me to do. I was exercising. I was taking medication as prescribed. I was watching my sleep. I was even managing my circadian rhythm to a certain extent. So blue light blocking glasses and trying to get good sleep. And I wasn't well. I wasn't well.
Exactly.
And I remember going manic every March and tracking my sleep. And it was always the same pattern. It was getting less and less sleep for 3 or 4 nights. And then I'd have to take more antipsychotic medication. And for me, looking back, it's a testament to how broken the healthcare system is.
Absolutely.
Here in the United States, for sure, in the West, the fact that my family had resources and I was doing everything that they asked me to do, but I could not get well.
Yes, exactly.
And then when I went on keto in 2021, it just changed everything.
Yeah.
And everything just fell into place. And, it's just remarkable. And your experience also, it kind of echoes my own of hearing about it constantly from friends of mine and other people, how, oh, dude, I'm eating like low-fat meats. You can't survive without carbohydrates.
Yes, yeah.
It's just strange to me that we just still have these misconceptions that are buried in false research from the 20th century.
Yeah.
When you could do very well, gain muscle, have good fitness, good cognitive health, better probably mental health for a lot of people than you would eating carbs. I think there is a low carb tsunami coming, but your experience just speaks to the fact that people don't understand this and they don't know about this yet, and it's so sad.
Yeah, it's true, and everything you said is is absolutely my experience in a way too, right? I tried so hard to do everything the doctors wanted. My parents tried so hard to make sure that everything was right. We were thankfully able to visit, in the US to get a doctor who was up to date on the latest research in a way and mental health and things like that. And yet still it was just my mental and physical health was just getting worse and worse. And absolutely, oh man, I tell you what, keto, I've never been so at just physically, what it used to be is I'd exercise, right? And then I couldn't do much for the rest of the day because I had no energy, mentally or physically, right? You always hear, oh, you're supposed to exercise and that'll give you energy. And I was like, it just drains. It's like the little bit of energy that I did have completely drained. And so then I started, after doing keto, I was like, I'm literally doing 1 push-up, 2 push-up, 3, and I couldn't even do 1 before, but like, it's like when my body was tired, instead of getting more tired, it's like my body then pushed in a bunch of energy, like, hey, I got you, and I was like, whoa, I'm like so much stronger and just have so much more endurance just from the way I'm fueling myself. I used to walk up the stairs. It's just so nuts, again, like 16 and exercising and everything, and yet I'd walk up a flight of stairs and be totally out of breath. And so really soon after starting keto, I would just walk up the stairs and I'd already immediately sort of brace for impact, if you will, wait to have to, breathe and kind of like that. And I'd just stand there and be like, I don't know, I'm feeling good. It's like I didn't even walk up a flight of stairs, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? So just from the way you fuel your body, it can either completely sap your energy or really give you strength and energy. So yeah.
The way I kind of think of it is like, I totally relate that with exercise. It's like, oh, you should exercise, it'll make you feel better. But you're just like you already feel like you ran a marathon and you just need to lie down when you have bipolar depression, especially.
Yes, exactly.
And then it's like, oh, and then you just get more exhausted if you try and exercise. And
Yes,
you're like, this doesn't make me
exactly.
feel. But then on keto, when I exercise, it's totally different. I get the benefit of exercise, and now I understand why it makes you feel good. But I never
Yes,
experienced that
yes,
before keto. Is that the same
exactly.
for you?
Yes,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
so interesting.
And I used to hate exercising. I was like, I gotta do it for my health, but I feel crap afterwards. And now it's difficult for me to stop. I'm like, okay, I have to like get on with the rest of my day. It's like, but this feels so great. So
Yeah,
I was
that's
humbled by the, like, I think when I was in my teens, I had this, I was doing well. This was before my illness started. I had this mentality of, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
yes,
Have the
exactly.
self-discipline. If you're depressed, you just don't have the willpower. And my experience of this illness completely humbled me and completely changed my perspective and helped me realize that with a system that's running on primarily carbohydrates and glucose,
Mhm.
it just, your body, your brain has the wrong fuel. And
Yeah.
telling people, oh, you just have to just go out and exercise, bro, just do it. It makes me think that, you using the keto as the first resource. So let's do the
Exactly.
keto first, and
Mhm.
let's not worry about the exercise maybe. And let's not worry about all of these other, let's just try to adhere to the diet first. And I think for a lot of people, and this is what I've heard kind of repeatedly, is once people get going in ketosis, the ketones start flowing, sometimes just the energy and the willpower comes back naturally,
Exactly.
organically. And then people suddenly want to exercise. I've heard Dr. Palmer talk about this. He talked about, he didn't understand how people would enjoy going out to run 8 miles and have a
Yeah.
blast. But then suddenly you go on keto, your body's burning ketones, and that's enjoyable.
Yeah. And I don't think, I don't think we're meant to be sedentary beings. You know what I mean? I think our body wants to move, but it just needs the energy. It needs the fuel, and then it's ready. It's like, yes, please, let's move, So
there's so many interesting, I totally agree with that. It's once you have the right fuel source, you naturally want to exercise and move around, and it's weird for people to understand how it is to never feel like that, to never ever want to move at all and just be in your room for like weeks and weeks on end. It's really hard for people to imagine. There's so many interesting things that you said. One of them is that PCOS is, like you said, a condition caused by insulin resistance. And it's really great that you had a mom who's clued into this, because and that you were thinking about this way, because a lot of people wouldn't have made that connection, that these are two conditions. Bipolar has high rates of it. Over 50% of people with bipolar have measurable insulin resistance. And PCOS is a condition that seems to be, I think the evidence is very strong now that it is caused by insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And if you speak to people with bipolar, and I've seen at least a handful of people on forums that have PCOS and bipolar who are doing ketogenic diet for PCOS, and they're also saying, you can Google this and find examples
Yes.
of this where
Yeah.
people are saying, oh, it's weird, I did this for my PCOS, but also my bipolar is getting better. And you
Yes,
can just
exactly.
search like Reddit, for example, and it actually led me to like a whole paper on this called lithium and insulin signaling, about how because the same mechanisms that they use to treat PCOS are the same mechanisms some of the bipolar medications act on.
Wow.
So how did your experience with keto help with all these physical symptoms? How was this comparable to your experience when you're on medication? Did medication help the physical symptoms, and did they help in anywhere? Was the degree of improvement you experienced on lithium similar to keto or of a different order? How would you compare the effects of keto to being on medication?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I think medicine, I think medicine helped me survive so I could try out keto. That's how I'd put it.
Yeah.
So I physically was just going downhill. Years, again, early teenagehood. I started puberty right when I was like 10. So by the time I was 11, 12, I was already gaining weight, hormonal, right? The PCOS had been awakened, if you will. So just, I was completely going downhill physically and mentally. I felt my pills, even though the levels were being upped, I just felt like they didn't work quite like before. Again, I'd always still struggled with depression, but now it was this depression was getting worse and more consistent. And it's like, I feel like the pills are almost, it's like they were, even though they were in higher doses, it's like they're starting to dilute a bit in a way in their effects. And so going keto, it was completely different. My meds, I would say, kept me sane enough and well enough so that I could live a normal life for someone who's very ill, I guess is how I'd say it. If you're very ill, but you can still manage to sort of live a life, that's great. That's great. That's kind of where it was. Like it's great with how sick you are that you're actually able to at least do school, even if you have to be home, that I didn't have to be locked up in a mental hospital, basically. That was like a big thing, right? And so that was kind of where the meds were. It's like, okay, you don't have to be locked up in a mental hospital or you're not that bad, right? But keto was like, no, you're actually healthy. You're doing well, right? And that's kind of the difference physically and mentally.
That's my same experience. It was like I was able to do school on all these meds and I wasn't in the hospital.
Yes.
So I guess it was better than being in the hospital, but
exactly.
I wasn't well. I was struggling in like physics classes and math classes, and I had brain fog and my chest was bad. And can you relate to seeing a cognitive improvement when you went on keto? You talked about that a little bit with your memory, and what did that look like?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I had a much better memory. That was one thing. The other thing is I felt I had energy to think, if that makes any sense. So I wasn't constantly sleeping. I'd get sleep, but I was constantly tired. And after keto, it was like, no, I've got mental energy. I can think about this. I can do this. Mental and physical energy just really shot up, and it actually came to the point where I was like, I like gotta do, so I think I'm maybe more of a creative person, but I have like a lot of outlets now. I like to draw, I like to write, I like to do all these things on top of my school and whatnot, because I just have the energy to do it. And I just, in my head, I love to create stories. So I'll see even just like a picture or something, and I'll create a whole story, a whole background for who this person in the picture or whatnot. And I just love it. But I actually have the energy to do that. And it's really nice. I have the energy to be creative, I guess is how I'd say it. Growing up, I was told like, oh, you're so creative, right? And I think I have no energy to do anything with it. I had a doctor once, I'm sure she meant well. She didn't really know, but she meant well. But she told my mom, she said, this is when I was going to school and I was in second grade. And this teacher told my mom, you should take her off her medication. She's so creative. She needs to do something with it. The meds stunt her. And in a way, they really numbed me, and I had zero motivation, nothing. And I had that after going keto, just being off the meds. But my mom was like, yeah, if I take her off the meds, obviously she'll like die, she'll kill herself, so no. Right. But yeah, going off the meds and being on keto, it's almost like I have a hope in life. I just have a hope, and I look forward to the future, and I have these things I'd like to do, and I'm doing them, and I just see sort of a light in the future, which is just nice. Before, I felt either I was depressed or was sort of a robot, like if I got up in the morning, and I wasn't depressed, I would just make my bed, go eat breakfast, get ready, because that's what I was told to do. But I had like no inner voice or inner feeling like, hey, I'd like to do this, or I feeling this way or whatever. It was either depressed or I'm just following the rules or the order of things, but I'm not even really thinking or feeling.
I totally relate to that. Like, it's so weird being robotic and just doing the day because
Yes,
you
exactly.
basically don't want to upset your family by being suicidal, or you're just kind of doing it, but you don't derive any good feeling from it. It's like it's such a hard way for people to exist. But and then on keto, like you wake up in the morning, early in the morning, feeling like, oh, there's things out there to do, there's things to see, there's projects,
Yes,
there's things I can
exactly.
do to like help like it's actually like a feeling of wanting to go out into the world.
Yes, exactly.
That's it's so wonderful to hear people with bipolar describing that, because it's so rare to hear that you
Yes,
feel that
yes.
motivation, excitement about it.
Mhm.
And I want to mention, like you're saying, I'm really glad that you mentioned that the medications helped you at that time, because I think, Matt, you said the same, like when you were really unwell, they helped you to just to get to a stable place. And so we always say on the show, like, if you're thinking about you always must speak to your psychiatrist, you must do this with the support of your psychiatrist. Don't come off your medications and think that things are going to work out, because
Yep.
it's really dangerous. The withdrawals from those are really severe. And even if you think keto is the most effective treatment in the world, which we don't, which we're establishing through scientific work and clinical work, and we hope to show that this can be something that people can use in a safe way. But until we have the knowledge of exactly all the best and safest ways to do this, please speak to your psychiatrist, work with a dietitian, and don't just come off your medications, because it's
don't follow
dangerous.
my example, and don't follow my example by just going off and being like, oh, I won't tell my parents. We'll see how this works. Don't do. I was very lucky. I think very lucky. I was blessed.
Yes.
And also, if it works, like coming off the meds will manage itself. Even now, for me, there are medications, like I'm still on a couple that I'm eager to get off. Like I very badly want to get off, but it's just, it takes time. I mean, for me, I can only speak from my own experience, but for me, it takes time, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And normal. And getting off meds is not an easy thing, especially some of the meds. I had to get off Valium, benzo, and it's difficult.
Absolutely.
Keto has made it easier, though. I mean, without keto, I don't know how I could have ever done it.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, and please follow like Matt's example of doing it the right ways, with psychiatrists gradually. And like one thing I know as well is, on the show, we all have amazing family. Like we've all got people who are looking out for us, and I think every guest we speak to, that's like a common theme, is that their family is looking out for them, and they're if they're able to help them see, like, we should do this gradually and do it. And that was certainly the case for me. Like with my father, he's a doctor, and he understood, like, even when I was doing keto, he was like, well, let's just take this really slowly, and let's work with it. He did it. It was done in like a very safe way. So it's really wonderful to you describing this. And how long have these benefits of doing keto been for you? How long have you been on the diet for?
Since I was 17, and I'll be 20 at the end of this year, so about 3 years.
Fantastic. We keep hearing this, like, people say, well, this is not sustainable, this is not a sustainable diet, and particularly with someone with mental illness. What's your feeling about that, when people say that this isn't a sustainable diet for people with mental illness?
Yeah, I would say it's very interesting to me, because to me it's like, I'm super healthy, why wouldn't I want to sustain that? You know what I mean? Like, I found a way to be really healthy, why wouldn't I want to continue that? That's kind of my answer to that, is it's absolutely, if it works really well, I think it's absolutely sustainable. I don't want to be as miserable as I was before. I don't want to be sitting there thinking I'm probably not going to be able to have a family. I'm probably not going to be able to go to college. I'm probably gonna die of a heart attack or something before I'm 40. You know, I don't want to be sitting there at lunch thinking I can't even remember what happened this morning, no matter how hard I think about it. Absolutely. Absolutely, this is sustainable, because it's almost like I've been born anew. It's almost like a whole new life, a brighter life filled with so much more sunshine. It's like, that to me is absolutely sustainable.
And I don't know if doctors understand that people who are in the middle of this kind of suffering of bipolar will do anything. Like, many people will do anything to get better. And when doctors say, oh, people aren't going to adhere, well, our experience on the podcast and just talking to dozens of people who have recovered using metabolic treatment, metabolic intervention, diet, it speaks to the fact that people will do this if there's any chance of escaping the black abyss of this illness. You know, people will do it.
Yeah, black abyss is really just a great way of describing it, you know. And that's another thing too. I think, well, why do some people, I mean, people with bipolar will commit suicide? Why? Because they are at that point, they're like, I'm trying so hard to escape this pain and I don't see any other way. I'm just trying to escape the pain. And generally people don't commit suicide because they haven't tried everything and anything else that they know of, you know. So it's like, of course, when you're in that kind of suffering, of course you're going to, you know, want something that's going to make you feel better and healthier. Of course you would do it, you know.
That's a great point. And suicide is like, unpopular opinion, maybe, but for me, suicide seems like a very sensible solution when you're in that much pain. And I mean, people who don't have these illnesses maybe don't understand, but this is, you know, the bipolar depression. And I didn't have it as badly on the bipolar type 1. I didn't have as badly as some other people. I know, Ian, you've described horrific depressions in your past of just not wanting to live, no energy, just this heaviness over you for months and months and months on end. And, you know, people will, like I said, people will do anything to escape that, whatever the means is. So for me, suicide, you know, is super unfortunate. And I'm hoping that as more and more awareness spreads about this diet, people won't have to resort to that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really and especially like it was really sad to hear that when you're so young you also experienced the you know, suicidal impulses. It's like really something terrible at that age. That, you know, how can you imagine someone that's, you know, a young child that would even think about something like that? But it's just, there's a level of like discomfort, like Matt, you're saying. It's like, it's almost like a rational, it's not rational, but it's like there's just a level of discomfort of existing that is impossible to sustain. And when people cross over that, they make this decision. It's terrible. And it's not like you know, it doesn't make sense, but it's just this physical discomfort, and they say, I can't go on anymore like this. And I think what you're saying as well that was interesting is a physical illness as well as a mental illness. Like your whole body is suffering. It's not, you can't exercise, you can't enjoy exercise, you can't function in normal ways, you can't you know, even your, like you say, your whole system, your whole biology is affected by this. And so the kind of benefits you describe, from the reduction of like your joint pain to your PCOS to your mental health symptoms, like the body's a whole machine, and when you improve it in this way, you experience these system-wide benefits. So do you think so a big thing for people with bipolar disorder is the cardiovascular risk. It's like we have hugely, if we're not treated properly, we have hugely increased cardiovascular risk, and people tend to die early with bipolar. And the thing that's really hopeful about metabolic psychiatry is like we're improving the physical health as well as the mental health. Traditionally, it was thought like we have to take, you know, we just have to take the hit on our physical health to have the improvement in our physical health. But so you feel that this is both improved your physical and mental health at the same time, which is quite remarkable. What ways do you experience this in your daily life? Is it the kind of you mentioned you having joint pain and arthritis, and also like the things with PCOS? What are the things that really change your life on a daily basis that make you think, wow, I'm actually improving physically as well as mentally?
You mentioned cardiovascular health. It's interesting. My heart, so I don't know what was up. I just know there's weird stuff going on. Before going keto, I had just randomly, my heart would beat, like I would just be sitting relaxing, but it would be like I was running. Like I was running a marathon, and I would just sit there, and I wasn't freaked out because at that point I was like, oh, what's new to my body? Like, but that would just happen randomly. Or I would have times again where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd awful chest pain, and I was just gasping for air, and I just wake up in the middle of the night like that. And then I just go back to sleep. Or again, for example, just walking up the stairs and my heart was beating and I was suffocating for air, and so obviously like something was going on, like my circulation wasn't good, for sure, with the swelling in the ankles and things like that, and just having this weird random stuff with my heart. And I was like, after keto, I don't have these issues at all. My heart is not pacing like that, it doesn't need to. It's like really chill now. So I figured I mentioned that. But I also just this, for example, this really awful abdominal pain that I'd get. I mean, it kind of started out like once, twice a month, kind of slowly. And it kind of came to the point where sometimes multiple times a day, I would just have this crippling pain. Like I would just almost like hunch over just in pain from just, I still don't know what it was, right? But it was just awful. I don't have that at all anymore. Like it just left after going keto. I developed, interestingly enough, so of course, I was an American kid. My mom's American, so I'm half American. That's German, but my mom's American. So of course, I had peanut butter and jelly growing up, of course, on whole grain toast, because we thought that was healthier at the time, right? And so of course, I always had peanut butter, peanuts, things like that. And yet, when I was 16, I developed a peanut allergy where my throat closed up and stuff, right? So I got an EpiPen prescribed, and I was like, what's going on? I developed really bad seasonal allergies, I think like pollen, which is now better on keto. It's much more manageable, but it does run in the family, so I don't know. We'll see. But just really bad, where my nose was constantly bleeding, eyes itching, just everything. So that got better after keto. Just all these crazy things where, again, I was in and out of the doctor's office and they did not know. My vision would go blurry randomly. I don't know why. Sometimes that just happened, where for 10, 15 minutes, sometimes it would be very blurry. And I was like, okay, right. Again, not freaking out because I was used to it at that point. Just weird random stuff happening to my body. And just crazy stuff like that, where I'm like, again, by the time I was 16, I was like, well, I'm just going to die soon. I just kind of accepted it as fate. And I seriously, after going keto, it's like none of that, it just all went away, which sounds crazy because like that much stuff just goes away, right? Literally, I've started, I've been eating a few peanuts again and nothing happened. Totally fine. So it's like, my throat closed up from peanuts beforehand and now it's fine again. So yeah, it's absolutely nuts.
You have to wonder how much of this is just like people. I mean, this is a theory. I mean, I'm sure the people have talked about this, some of the scientists, but your body's prone to metabolic dysfunction if you can't process glucose as well. And then you develop plethora of reactions to that. And then use a ketogenic diet to treat the bipolar. But then often a lot of these things the metabolic dysfunction is causing will fix themselves in the physical health, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the link between PCOS and bipolar is really well established scientifically. They're really highly comorbid, and again, you can find, if you Google, there's people talking about this online, that they have PCOS and they do ketogenic diet, and they're like, oh, my bipolar symptoms also got better. What's happening there? And what's really fascinating is that there's two treatments that are, there's a couple of things that are recommended for, well, three things. There's metformin is recommended for PCOS. We now have the TRIO-BD study by Cynthia Calkin showing that metformin helps with bipolar disorder. We also, inositol is recommended, and inositol is working on the same system that lithium works on bipolar. Lithium is a really complicated thing. It doesn't work for everyone. But for the people that it does, it's the inositol system that it's working on. And there's all these drug companies trying to develop inositol-based treatments. And we use inositol for PCOS. Maybe you were given it at some point. And then ketogenic diet is now also being used for, so there's three things that we use for PCOS that are being used for or are relevant to bipolar in some way. So if there's any scientists, clinicians listening, we need to pay attention to this. This is a condition that's highly comorbid with bipolar. And you're seeing people like our guest on the podcast today. Sorry, I can't say your name. It feels a bit weird saying our guest. But seeing these kinds of improvements, both physically and mentally at the same time, what does this say about the illness? It's really interesting.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to ask, what would be your message from going through all this for psychiatrists and clinicians listening? What would you like to see change about the way bipolar is viewed or treated, or what would be your message to them? Because there's many psychiatrists that listen to this.
Oh, awesome. Well, I would say, firstly, thank you so much for just listening, for being open-minded enough to listen. I think sometimes, and this is maybe my problem with sort of the current medical system, in the West at least, is that it feels almost closed-minded. It's like, well, this is not in the textbooks. Keto is currently, as far as I know, not like officially recognized as a way to treat bipolar, so must just be some scam fad diet or something, right? And so to clinicians and psychiatrists, whoever you are, if you're a doctor, please just be open-minded to the fact that there are people who could really, really benefit from this. And there is, science behind it now, which is awesome. I didn't know that at first, right? Part of the reason my mom got into metabolic health is because she said, well, why is this helping my daughter's bipolar disorder? This started out for PCOS and now it's helping with bipolar and all kinds of stuff, right? My mom was having other health issues. Wow, keto's really working well for me. What's going on here? And so that started her into a deep dive. So just being really open that there is science out there. It's just not always very mainstream or officially accepted, but there's a lot of good information out there. Please be open-minded to that and try and learn about diet and all these things, and keto especially, because a lot of people are being helped by it. I think it should be mainstream with the amount of science that's behind it and all the people who are behind it. So just really being open-minded to that. What you have in the textbooks right now is not all.
And I think if you're a clinician or psychiatrist and you're hearing this and assuming this is a fad diet, assuming this works on a case-by-case basis, or that it's a 10% contribution to an overall wellness program that caused the illness, that caused the recovery, and not considering it seriously as a viable treatment that you should be looking into, in depth, I think you're doing a great disservice to the people you're treating and the people who are struggling. And we've had dozens of guests on the podcast. There's serious research about this ketogenic diet as a viable treatment for bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression. And for the psychiatrists who are not willing to take it seriously and not willing to at least look into it, what are you doing? People are suffering, and this could help a lot of people. So, that would be my own message. The last question I wanted to ask you, Em, how have you seen your relationships, life, school, etc., change as a result of this?
Well, it's so cool. I'm still a bit of an introvert, but I'm much more social. Like, I have many more friends because I just have the energy to go out. And I'll put it this way. I say it this way. I love to be happy. I love to laugh. I love to just be in good company. And I think a lot of people, from my experience, actually going out now and being healthy, a lot of people kind of like me. I don't know. And it's just so awesome. I really just meeting great people, and and I can actually meet great people and stay friends with them. It's so difficult. And I've had really understanding friends, but it's so difficult to, for example, not reach out or just be in a bad mood when you meet up with them and you feel really bad. Because I'm trying not to dampen the mood. I'm trying not to get them to worry about me, but I have zero energy to even put a smile on my face. The other thing is that I'm much more adventurous. Like, I was taking the train one day and I was like, what if I just got off on a stop or two before where I generally get off, just to look around the city. Like, this looks cute. This is a nice area. I had a whole day ticket. I could always hop back on and get back home. But why not try that out? My past self would have never done that. My past self would have been sat there on the train, fidgeting, really just anxiety ridden. That's another thing, had high anxiety, much better now with keto. I'm actually inwardly, I think I'm a very adventurous person, and that's coming out now. and it's really showing, and I can just act on that. And I like to be positive, so I'm always putting a positive spin on things, and I just love it, and I'm actually able to do that now.
That's wonderful to hear. That's yeah, and it's like, it's funny, the things you can't do when you're depressed are so numerous,
Yeah.
like, or unwell with bipolar, that when you come out of it, it really feels like, wow, there's like a whole world to explore out there.
Exactly.
So I'm
Ian,
just so glad that you found it as, yes.
Sorry, do you think people who have, bipolar, because they do like worse on the carbs, they end up doing better when they get on keto, and it's like this superhuman effect?
I think well, what we know about ketones is they produce in the heart muscle certainly 32% more ATP or energy than a glucose molecule. So presumably this also happens in the brain to a degree where you're just generating more energy. So yeah, I think that's true, that if even someone who's if you took the same person and they're fully efficiently processing glucose, you would still get a benefit of doing ketosis that heightens the energy level in their brain. So if you get someone who's not processing glucose effectively, and then you put them on ketosis, they're not just going up to like the normal level of glucose, they're also benefiting from this like 32% more ATP that ketones generate per molecule, and on also all the anti-inflammatory effects and other things. And this is like an evolutionary conserved mechanism to help us during, like when you need to go and look for food, and your times of starvation or whatever, that it's preserved to make you more effective and be able to think better. So yeah, I totally think there could be an additional benefit that you get, and I think that makes sense scientifically. But it's not, it's sustainable and it's healthy, and the brain likes it, and actually the ketones are good for the brain in the long term and repair them. So it's a really, yeah. Is that what you feel as well, that you've got a higher level of function? You were saying even with chess, you notice the difference.
Yeah, I've noticed with chess, I've noticed with analytical thinking, problem solving, executive functioning, especially executive functioning, managing tasks, organizing, keeping track of things. I just mentioned that because I've noticed that it sometimes seems like the worst people are when they're on the carbs. So having mental illnesses, comorbidities because they're eating too many carbohydrates. Maybe their systems are designed to do even better than average on ketones. Now, this is just my theory, but then when they end up doing the ketosis to try to help the mental illness, it's like a superpower. These are maybe the people who are the top 10% of best performers on ketones. And then when they end up doing this, it's just life-changing. I mean, we hear that over and over again on this podcast.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in Alzheimer's, they find even if glucose metabolism is not working properly, ketones can be fully utilized by people, even quite old people. So it's so yeah, but the best thing I think is hopefully to get it to people when they're young, like Emma's describing, like when you're 20, and and when you're in your 20s, Matt, like that's the best time, because that's when in epilepsy you get remission, like you get like a lifelong improvement that lasts even coming off the diet. And so I only found it when I was in my sort of, well, I've been on this for 7 years. So I was 20, it must have been 29 when I started it. And it was very, I think I was a little bit late. I have to keep on keto all the time. But I think if you get it in your early 20s, you can probably, I'm not saying this is advice, but maybe we'll find it similar to epilepsy, where then people will have a full remission that's like lifelong, which has been well documented in epilepsy with keto. So I'm really hoping that's the case.
And it just makes me so optimistic for you, Em, having gone on keto in your late teens, that you might not, hopefully, knock on wood. I mean, it's the same situation for me. You might not have to deal with this, and maybe you won't have to be on keto all the time your whole life. We don't know. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ian. The earlier we can get people on this, before the illness and the momentum of the illness becomes entrenched in the brain, you have repeated episodes throughout your 20s, and then in your 30s over and over, it becomes that much more difficult to recover and to heal. I mean, the better. Yeah,
and that's actually interesting that you say that, because I've noticed this wasn't at first, but after probably these past few months or so, I've realized that. So I occasionally have gone more recently to like more low carb, but not keto. And before, again, even though I was better low carb, I was just best keto, including depressional. I would still get a bit depressed and all in low carb. But I've noticed somehow that my body is much, it's able to handle the low carb better. It still doesn't prefer low carb, I'll put it that way, but it's able to handle the carbs much better. And it used to be I'd eat, for example, some carbs that were above like I think I started like 25 net carbs or something like that a day. And if I go above that, I would get all kinds of nerve issues, my vision would go gray, just all kinds of issues, and I'd be like, absolutely, my body just immediately reacts really badly. And now I'll eat some and I'll be okay, and I'd be like, oh, okay. And I can even, interestingly enough, get full on a certain level of carbs where before going keto, I was always hungry. Even though I had food to eat, I was always hungry. Again, like obviously I was not getting any energy from those carbs. And now it's like I can actually kind of last. It still doesn't last as long, the energy from the carbohydrates, but it lasts a bit longer and I can get a little more full. So I think somehow my body has gotten a bit better at utilizing carbohydrates, but I absolutely still prefer keto. It's much more superior. It's much superior in that sense. And another thing, you were just talking about how you got better in like problem solving skills and stuff. I noticed, so I was pretty good in math until I went into algebra, and then I just absolutely failed. But by that time I had just my brain was just done. I was just tired. So now I recently did a bit of algebra, and I was like, hey, it's almost like I got a new brain or brain reset. So it's still a bit difficult for me. It's a very boring subject. That's probably why. But it's like, hey, if I actually stick to it and I'm consistent, I could do this. I could get this done. I would not fail this class again if I took it, you know? And so that's just very interesting. So you're just mentioning that. I figured I'd throw that in as well.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, like, you definitely see on Charlie Foundation website, there are kind of people that did keto for epilepsy, and they have celebrations where someone comes off the diet and they celebrate with birthday cake. I'm not saying it's a good idea. You know, but it's like they're making the point that they can go back to eating sugar. I mean, I would never buy sugar for anyone for any reason. But you know, they can go back to eating kind of some level of carbs and still. So it's really interesting that maybe if you find people early enough, you can kind of do a lot more repair and prevent more damage, and then they're going to be fine for the rest of their life. That is what I love, is that idea. That would be possible. And even for people who are further down the line, they're still going to have the benefit if they stay on the diet more strictly and get higher ketone levels. And you see that in diabetes. David Unwin gave a talk recently that I was watching saying this, that in the main thing of all the factors that predicted whether you could get remission, like lifelong remission from diabetes, was how early you intervened. So the earlier that someone was in having diabetes, the more likely they were to achieve complete remission. And the ones who didn't achieve complete remission, but he also showed that the ones who didn't achieve complete remission had more overall improvement because they're often much more damaged. So that they got so much better because they were already so damaged, but they didn't reach full remission. But people who were younger were able to do that. So it's that's
exciting.
We're going to find out these things in the coming years. It's very exciting.
We just don't know. It's really, and for me, it's been a whole experience of trial and error and trying to figure out what works. And I've learned that I don't need to be in ketosis all the time. Fortunately, I'm still in ketosis every weekend. I try to check in and at least get them pumping above 0.6, 0.7 minimum, get the MCT oil going, get the little bit of fasting, a little bit of cardio in the morning, and at least get back into it once a week. And then, but I found if I drift out for a day or two and I happen to have a few carbs that are in some salad dressing, it's not the end of the world. I don't go into psychosis. I don't start to sleep 4 hours. And that's just been my own experience. I think it's probably pretty dangerous to try to prescribe a one-size-fits-all dietary solution for these illnesses because it can be so different from person to person, as we've seen, Ian. And it just depends on the person and the situation. And I wish we knew more. I wish we knew more about, oh, this is your situation. You've done this. You developed the symptoms at this age. This is your diagnosis. Okay, you need to do this version of keto. Unfortunately, we just don't know that yet. I hope we do learn at some point so we can inform people a little bit more comprehensively, but it is what it is for the time being. We kind of just got to figure it out on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that's where we're going. But I think that's credit to you being so good with that. You know, you did like a really strict period of ketosis, like in epilepsy. And then I think that's what allows the brain to heal, is you're giving this brain an incredible environment for healing over a sustained period of time. And then that probably means you can be much more introduce carbs during the week and not, and just like, I think I've heard now from 3 people who've had full lifelong remission, just people on the internet, people I've spoken to with bipolar that have done this, where they've done a very strict period and come off it. And it tends to be younger people, I think. So, but this is something that's like an active area of interest and research. So I'm super excited to find out more about it. But thank you for making the time to speak with us today. And thank you for sharing your story. And I want to give a shout out to your family and your mom. And unfortunately, I can't say without giving away your identity. But hopefully we could ask her to come on the podcast anonymously as well at some point and share a bit about her nutrition work, because she's obviously been on this journey with you and decided to dedicate her life to helping other people with this as well. And we see this many times in our own family, my own father and Matt's family, and in your family as well. When the family sees this level of improvement, they're like, right, okay, we need to spend a lot of time trying to figure. And it's just a natural response. Like if your kid is unwell and you see this level of improvement, so it's really credit to your mum for helping you through this journey and for now going on a journey to help other people with it. So hopefully she might come on anonymously at some point as well. But it's really remarkable what you've done, and congratulations for surviving for some such, I can't even imagine since such a young age, the mental strength and capacity you must have to get through an illness like this. So all credit to you for getting through this and reaching the stage. And I think your story will help a lot of people. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Yeah, thanks. It takes a lot of grit to get through it, and you sound great, and you sound like you're doing really, really, really well. You can just hear it in your voice and in your tone and your optimism. So it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share my story, even though I stayed anonymous. I really hope I can help some people with it. And I'm just also really grateful for my family, who was just really behind me the whole time, I mean, I think that's part of the reason I survived, it was because I had my family who were very, we got, despite all the struggles, I think we kind of got really tight knit, because we really were there for each other. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And thank you so much for having me on and letting me share this.
Thank you for coming on. It was great speaking with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.